Hello, I'm Martin Park. For those that don't know me, I'm a naturopath and a master coach and trainer who has been working professionally in health, fitness, wellness and personal development for over 46 years. If you are someone who is interested in learning how to maximize your overall health, well-being and performance, then welcome. In last week's episode, I spoke about the rebound trap, that frustrating phenomenon where we achieve our goals only to slip back to where we started. We explored how this primarily happens when we focus solely on outcomes rather than processes, and when we temporarily change our behaviors without addressing our fundamental identity. Today, I want to shift our perspective entirely. I want to introduce a concept that has the potential to transform how you view your health and wellness. A concept that I call living as art when health becomes your masterpiece. Most people approach health as a duty, a series of tasks to be completed, items to be checked off a list, a burden to be shouldered, weight to manage, calories and nutrients to count, workouts and exercise to endure, relaxation and rest, squeezed in like yet another obligation. And from where I stand, as they do this, they miss the profound beauty of what health actually is. Consider for a moment what an artist does. An artist doesn't simply apply paint to canvas out of obligation. They don't sculpt or write or compose or practice their chosen craft because they've been told they should. No, they create because something within them seeks expression, because they seek to see possibilities that others don't, because they're driven by their vision, their take, their leaning, not merely by compliance or expectation. What if we approached our health and well-being with the same artistic sensibility? What if, rather than seeing ourselves as reluctant, nutritious food eaters or begrudging exercisers and bored meditators, we saw ourselves as artists, craftspeople engaged in the ongoing creation of our own vitality and well-being? And this isn't mere semantics or an attempt at clever reframing. This, if looked at correctly, represents a fundamental shift in how we relate to the project of being well. An artist doesn't resent the hours spent perfecting their craft. They don't complain about the focus required or the iterations necessary to get things right. They understand that creation takes time, that masterpieces emerge gradually, and that the journey itself holds intrinsic value. The artist knows that every small choice matters. Each brushstroke, each chisel mark, each note played, each precise movement in a martial art, all shaping the final expression and contributing to the whole. Just as each meal we relish, each activity we savor, each moment of rest and reflection we carve out for ourselves has the potential to shape the masterpiece of our personal well-being. And within that lies the crucial difference between approaching health as a duty versus approaching it as art is inherently personal. No two artists create identical works, even when painting the same portrait, photographing the same landscape, or playing the same piece of music, as the art emerges from the unique vision and sensibility of its creator. Similarly, your health, when approached as art, becomes uniquely yours. It's not about following someone else's prescription or comparing yourself to someone else's standards or behaviors. It's about discovering what works for your body, your mind, your emotional state. It's about discovering what feels right to you and what brings you authentic vitality and joy. I love going to the gym and training with weights. I love walking. When living near to a coastline, I love to go surfing. I eat as an omnivore. I relax through reading and especially by watching movies, which is one of my favorite things of all time. You may do yoga or boxing or ballroom dancing or play tennis or basketball or any of the other myriad of wonderful activities that humans enjoy. You may be vegetarian or vegan or paleo or carnivore or an omnivore like me. You may meditate, take a bath, go fishing, walking, running, or simply sit quietly in amongst nature. I've worked with thousands of people over my career, and those who found lasting success with their health and vitality were invariably those who stopped trying to force themselves into someone else's mold and instead began crafting their own individual masterpiece of well-being. They experiment, they discover, they listen deeply to their body's signals, needs, and warnings. They develop a positive relationship with food and nourishment that goes way beyond metrics and measurements. They find forms of movement and activity that feel like a personal expression rather than a punishment. They allow themselves time each day to pause and reflect and be at peace and calm with themselves and their environment. And they cultivate ways of thinking and being that support and nurture their individual journey, their life. And in doing so, they become an artist. Unlike an artist who doesn't view their materials, requirements, or processes as obstacles to overcome, but simply as collaborators in their creative process, the person who approaches health as art doesn't see their body as something to be conquered or controlled, but as the very medium through which their life is expressed. This shift from duty to art changes everything. It transforms I should into I choose. It moves us from resignation to inspiration. It reorients us from focusing on what we're giving up to appreciating what we're creating. And perhaps most importantly, it acknowledges that health is not a fixed destination, but a dynamic creation, something that evolves, changes, and deepens over time. Just as an artist's work develops as they mature, our relationship with our health and well-being becomes more nuanced, more personal, and more meaningful as we progress on our journey. I believe to a large extent, a very large extent, we've been approaching living healthy all wrong. We've made it into a moral imperative, something we should do, ought to do, must do. We've compartmentalized it and tried to make it a one-size-fits-all solution. We've loaded it with judgment and shame, while at the same time disconnecting it from pleasure, meaning, identity, and worse still, personal autonomy and needs. And in doing so, we robbed ourselves of the profound joy that comes from crafting our own well-being using the raw materials of food, movement, rest, and mental practice to create lives of vitality, energy, and authentic health. So I ask you, do you want to look at your health and well-being as some form of penance, as a duty, as an obstacle to be overcome, or not? What would change if you saw yourself not as someone trying to force your body into compliance, but as an artist engaged in the ongoing creation of your own well-being? What if you approached each meal not as a test to pass or fail, but as an opportunity to create something nourishing, satisfying, and aligned with your deeper values and needs? What if you celebrated movement not as a punishment for calories consumed, but as a celebration of what your body can do, a form of physical self-expression? What if you treated sleep and rest not as something that cuts into your productive time, but as an essential part of your creative process, knowing that rest and recovery are when integration happens? This is what it means to live as art, to approach health not as a duty you must fulfill, but as a masterpiece you are continuously creating. And the beautiful thing about this approach is that it's inherently sustainable, because art isn't something we do temporarily. It's not a phase we go through. It's an ongoing process of creation and expression that becomes more refined, more authentic, and more meaningful over time. When health becomes your masterpiece, you don't need motivation to maintain it any more than a passionate painter needs motivation to pick up a brush, or a dedicated musician needs motivation to play their instrument. The creation itself becomes intrinsically rewarding. I invite you to consider, what would your masterpiece of health look like? Not according to anyone else's standards or expectations, but according to your own vision, your own values, your own sense of what makes a life well lived. So this week, I encourage you to begin viewing yourself as the artist of your own well-being, to approach each choice, each meal, each movement, each moment of rest as a brushstroke in your masterpiece, to foster curiosity rather than judgment, to invite creativity rather than rigidity, to embrace experimentation rather than perfectionism. Living as art doesn't mean your health will be perfect, as no masterpiece is without its flaws, but it does mean that your journey toward well-being will be infinitely more meaningful, more personal, and ultimately more you. Because when health becomes your masterpiece, you stop living for the finish line and start appreciating the creative process itself. If you need my assistance in helping with any of this, I will leave a link in the description. I thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate your company. I look forward to spending some time with you again. Bye for now.